Hi guys, welcome to episode 3, which is going to be on properties. And so this is going to correspond with chapter 2, lesson 1. So lesson 2.1. So first we're going to talk about the commutative property. And so the word commute means to change locations. So if you think about, some people use this term when they talk about how long it takes to get from their house to school or their house to work. And so the commute time changes depending on how far you are from school. Or sometimes it can talk about how are you commuting? Are you commuting by plane, by train, by car, by bike? So commute means to change locations. So that applies to math because you can add or multiply numbers in any order. So you can change the order when you're multiplying or adding to make the problem easier to solve. So for example, -7 times 4. The product of -7 times 4 is going to be the same as the product of 4 times -7. They're both going to give us an answer of -28. Another example is 48 plus 25 plus 12. So now I have three numbers that I'm adding. Since we're just adding, I don't need to use my order of operations rules because we just have one operation. So when I think about this, what would be the easiest numbers to add first? So looking here, I have 48 plus 25 first. Now that one's going to be a little bit trickier because I'm going to have to carry a number from my ones place to my tens place. So to me, the easiest numbers to add would be 48 plus 12. If I add those first, I'm going to get a whole number, right? Which is 60. That's a really friendly number to work with. And so then I can add 60 plus 25. So 60 plus 25, I can do that really easily in my head and get 85. So when I flip the order around, it makes it easier to solve this addition problem in my head. So our key point is using the commutative property helps us to evaluate expressions mentally. The next property is the associative property. And so the word associate means to group together. So if you think about your friends at school, y'all are kind of like associates. Y'all associate or group together because you're friends. In the business world, we can think about like your parents that work. They could say that they're coworkers. Another way for that is an associate because they work together. They're grouped together. They work together in the same place. So how that applies to math is that you can change the grouping of a multiplication or addition problem, and it does not change the answer. So if you change the grouping when you're adding or multiplying, it will not change the answer. So for example, we have 3 times parentheses 10 times 4. So if we think about the product of this expression, I would first do 10 times 4 to get 40, and then 40 times 3 will give me 120. But if I change the grouping and group together 3 times 4, then I do 3 times 4 first and get 12, then times 10 is 120. So I'm going to get 120 for both expressions. All I did is flip which two numbers were in the parentheses. Now, we're also changing the order because we're flipping the 3 times 10 to 10 times 3, but the most important thing that we're changing is the grouping. So we're changing the grouping, we still get the same product. Thinking about this addition example, so we have 17 plus 36, then plus 13. So if I wanted to solve this mentally, how could I change the grouping to make this easier? Well, I'm going to look for two numbers that are friendly to combine. 17 plus 36 aren't very friendly because I'm going to have to carry a number to the tens place. So I would add together 13 plus 17 first. So 13 plus 17 I could group together to get 30. Then 30 plus 36 is easy to do in my head. So our key point is using the associative property helps us to evaluate expressions mentally. The third property is the identity property. And so we're going to have two different properties depending on if we are multiplying or adding. So the identity property of addition states that the sum of a number and 0 is itself. So anything plus 0 is going to be that number. That's the bell. The identity property of multiplication states that the product of a number and 1 is itself. So anything times 1 is always going to be that same number. For example, -1 plus 0. Since I'm adding nothing to -1, it's not going to change the sum. So my sum will be -1. Same with multiplication. If I multiply 54 times 1, so one group of 54 is just going to be 54. And so what's different is that if I do 54 times 0, that's not going to give me 54. And negative 1 plus 1 is not going to give me negative 1. So you've got to make sure that the identity property of addition, I'm adding 0 because that will not change the sum. And the identity property of multiplication, I'm multiplying by 1 because that will not change my product. So I'm going to have you do some on your own. So what I'm going to show is 4 examples, and you're going to think about which property is being used. So our first example is negative 5 times 1 equals negative 5. Which property is shown here? Which property is shown here? 2 plus negative 9 equals negative 9 plus 2. Which property is shown here? X squared plus 0 equals x squared. And which property is here? 2 times PQ equals 2P times Q. So I'm going to show the answers on the next slide. If you're not totally done, pause here. If you are done, here are the answers. So the first one is the identity property of multiplication. Anything times 1 is itself. The second one shows the commutative property because I changed the order. The third one is the identity property of addition because anything plus 0 is itself. And the last one is the associative property because I changed the grouping. I changed what was in the parentheses. Okay, guys, hope this helped, and I will see you in class on Wednesday or Thursday. Be ready for your Do First quiz.